Hey. Hello everyone, and welcome to Smooth On, Making Things with Milo live presentation on polyurethane expanding foams for casting and other applications. Now, my name is Milo, and I am your host today. I'm also one of the material specialists here at Smooth On. Today, I am joined by Alex and Jeffrey. They will be handling our controls and monitoring our chat. Now, speaking of the chat feature, if you have any questions on today's presentation, on items that you see here displayed, on any of the products we're going to be using, please feel free to use the chat feature. Let us know your question, and we'll try our best to answer your question. Keep in mind that we are human beings here, so we might not know everything, but we'll do our best to answer your questions. If we don't get to your specific questions, please feel free to use the customer support page in the video description below, and that you can use to fill out a questionnaire, add some pictures, describe what you want to do with your project, and then either myself or one of my coworkers here will help you answer those questions or make some recommendations on materials so that you can proceed with your project. Now, what will we be learning here today? Today we'll be talking and learning about pourable expanding foams, when and why you would use pourable foams for projects, what the difference is between a closed cell and an open cell foam, what type of release agents are used for pourable foams, rigid versus flexible versus a silicone foam. Yes, Smooth On does make a silicone-based foam as well. What type of molding products and mold design work best for foam castings. There is different molds that you can make as well, and we'll talk about those, the expansion ratio and the weights associated with foam products, how to paint a casting with foam, and casting effects for foam products, as well as foam coatings, and some common issues that can happen when handling polyurethane foams. We do want to cover those as well, because we do know that people run into issues with materials, because we do as well. So let's go over some of the materials that we'll be using today. Today we'll be using the Foam It 3. This is a rigid foam. We're going to use the Flex Foam It 3. It's a flexible version of it. The Foam It 4 Black, Flex Foam It 7 FR. The FR stands for fire retardant. Foam It 26. Ease Release 2831, Universal Release Agent, as well as the Sonite Wax. So those are some of the materials that we'll be handling today, physically mixing them and pouring them. So remember that if you guys do have any questions, just feel free to let us know. Use the chat. Let us know what kind of questions do you have. It's kind of warm in here with no air movement, so you'll see me periodically cleaning my face. Can we get a fan going? Here we go again with that whole hot in here. So, let's start by talking about what polyurethane expanding foams are. So, what does your car, your bed, your couch, your architectural elements, your movie props, your office chair, your dish sponge, all have in common? Yes, you guessed it, foam. They all utilize some kind of foam product, and most likely these are polyurethane foams that they utilize that make our everyday life easier, more comfortable, and we don't even realize it that they're done so by using polyurethane products. So they are in our everyday life, and we literally take it for granted to have this material around. Now, when was the polyurethane foam invented? It was invented in 1937 by a German guy called Otto Bayer. 1937, the invention of foam, and it didn't really get into general usage until the 60s, when they started appearing in automotive industry, such as your car seats, and the furniture industry for cushioning foam that you would see. So that's the kind of introduction that we see of foam in our everyday lives. Before that, it was really an industrial product that you didn't really see or handle much. Today, they're available to you and I, DIYers, home crafters and makers for everyday applications. So the chemistry of the polyurethane foam that we're handling, or the Smooth-On makes here, is a two-component system that is water-blown. So it does have a water component that makes the foam actually expand. And based on which product you're choosing, that water-blown content could be more or less, creating larger or smaller cells in the material. Now, the material itself is a thermoset material, so the chemistry behind it is a thermoset product. What does that really mean? It means that it generates heat. When it comes together, the A and the B come together and you mix them, they generate heat in order to cure. That is what a thermoset material is, something that you will commonly see in polyurethane products such as resins. They generate heat when curing, so they can actually cure. Now, some of the foams that you and I are familiar with is something called, I think it's called Great Stuff. Yeah, so this is building foam that you and I can pick up at a hardware store. It comes in a can. It's a one-component material that air dries. What does that mean? So once you dispense the liquid inside a container, it comes out already as a foam, so there's no mixing involved. It comes out as a foam substance, and the air around it helps the material cure. There is no thermoset that is taking place here, whereby the pourable foams that Smooth-On manufactures are two components. There's a part A and part B. If you worked with Smooth-On products before, you're familiar that we have 99% of our products in A and B form. So you'll get an A and B you mix together in order to retain a rigid, flexible, or whatever product that you're mixing. So it's a two-component system versus a one-component system that you'll find at a store. Now, some other foam products that you guys and I am familiar with in our everyday world is cushioning foam. So if you're sitting down on your couch in your office chair, that foam cushion is made using polyurethane foam, and it's usually made in a mold. A liquid component, two-part liquid component, gets poured into a mold. It expands in that mold. Once you take it out, it's already in the shape of the object that you wanted it. Another foam application that is very common in the last few years that you've probably seen all over the place is the insulation foam, more specifically the spray insulation foam. So foam gets sprayed in between rafters, in between 2x4s, and it expands into material, into a foam product within 3 seconds. That is also a polyurethane foam. In this case, it's a spray material that's fast reacting and also has a lot of expansion. The mixing process takes place in the nozzle as the material exits. So another product that you're pretty familiar with is in our everyday world and is made out of polyurethane foam. Now, I did prepare a number of demos today that I'm going to run through, where I'm going to be using different materials to show you guys how these materials work. So for our first demo, I'm going to mix up some Foam-It 3 and also some insulation foam that we're simply going to dispense into a clean container. I want to show you guys how these products react when they're dispensed, when they're mixed. Getting warmer in here. Let me get our AC going. All right, so before you start using any of these products, you do want to make sure that you are safe when using these materials. And since we are using a very liquid product that splashes up easily, you want to make sure that you use protection eyewear. So whenever you're mixing stuff that's very liquid and it can splash up easily, make sure you use protection. So I'm going to put on my safety glasses and, of course, gloves. We'll protect our skin from contact with chemicals. Because after all, these materials are chemicals. Before they fully cure and are rigid or flexible, they are chemical substances. So, I've got here the Foam-It 3, and I have our great stuff foam here. This is a one-component building foam that you'll find at your hardware store. And here we have a two-component liquid polyurethane foam that Smooth-On makes, Part A and Part B. We want to follow the instructions, as I say, on the cap here, and of course in the technical bulletin by pre-mixing the material thoroughly. So make sure you shake up that product. And keep in mind that some of these are going to be more liquid than others. So it might take a little bit more effort to shake some of these materials up. And this is a one-to-one component material. My strength has left me. I cannot open that container. So I'm simply going to dispense these by volume. There's no gram scale necessary. And this does cure in a white color. Here we go. You could add some pigment if you wanted to the Part B. I generally don't pigment foams because they're so finicky that you can easily upset the chemistry of the product, and I don't want to be exposed to that. I want to make sure that this cures just right. So same thing with the expanding foam, the building foam. You want to premix it before you dispense it. And because these materials, foam in general, they love warm weather. We used to actually put these cans in the work van on the heater on the way to the construction site to warm up the material inside. It will react better. Foams like warmth. They don't like the cold. And to dispense this material, see how it comes out. It already comes out as a foam, so there's no liquid. The nice part about building foam like this is you can build it up on a side. It will do some slumping. But you can build it up quite neatly and easily on a vertical surface like that. That's something that the pourable foam just doesn't have. You don't have the foaming action that's taking place in the dispensing process. Instead, this is a two-part liquid, and just like the name it says, liquid, it flows into crevices. So it will not foam up just like a great stuff foam like we dispensed right now, the construction foam. It will actually continue being a liquid until the work time is up. And when mixing by hand, I like to whip as much air as possible into foam products and scrape the side, scrape the bottom. And of course, you want to keep in mind the working time of these materials when you're working with them. One thing to keep in mind is that the working time of foam products is extremely short. Rigid foams have a pot life anywhere from 1.5 minutes to 3 minutes, depending on the material that you choose. Once that working time expires, the material automatically starts to rise and expand. So here we have our liquid product, liquid foam that we mixed up, and then we're going to pour it into a form. In this case, it's a clear container, and I'm doing this so you guys can see. So again, this is a liquid. You can see it's already starting to gelatinize. It's not as liquid anymore, and actually it's starting already to expand. So it's quite warm in the studio. So the material itself is starting to react. So again, you have an example of what a pourable material is here versus a foam that already comes out in a foam substance. And you can see here that the material is already starting to expand. So it's starting to activate, and it is generating heat internally. Again, that is the activation that makes this chemistry possible. The heat makes the material expand and then cure. Keep in mind, the air bubbles inside, the air cells inside the foam are now expanding, because when you heat up air, what does it do? It expands. Therefore, the foam is now inside, the foam cells are expanding, the air is expanding, making the material rise. Now, this product, Foamit 3, has the most expansion rate of all the products that Smooth-On makes. You will see it expand about, I think, 16 times its original volume from what you pour. Don't quote me exactly on the number, but it has the most expansion ratio from all of our products. Now, if you have questions on pourable foam versus a building foam here, again, feel free to let us know. Again, this is the Foamit 3. The nice part about foam products from Smooth-On, they are available in many different weights. That's how we designate foams, whereby the building foam is available in, I believe, 2 or 3 different expansion categories or weight categories. So much more different options that you can get with a pourable foam like this. And you can see this material is still rising, actually. The pot life is 1.5 minutes, but it takes the material 2 hours to cure. So within that 2 hours, the material will continue to expand. And if you put your ear to it, you can hear it actually expanding as the little cells inside are expanding. Some of them are popping and crackling. So you have the Foamit 3 expanding. Now we're going to move this aside and move on with our presentation. Again, if you guys have questions on what you see here today presented, let us know. We'll try our best to answer those questions. I can take these off for now. We're not handling any materials. Now, let's talk about when and why you would use pourable urethane foams. So in our everyday world, yes, we have a wide variety of end products that utilize the foam, but when would you choose to utilize a product like this? So I have some examples that I prepped here that I'm going to show you guys, but in a basic explanation, you want to use polyurethane expanding foam when you have large voids that you're trying to fill. So if you're creating something that's large and you want to fill that space with something, rather than using a heavyweight product that might be too heavy for the application, too heavy for the sculpture that you're making, and possibly also too expensive because you're using so much of the product to fill that void, an inexpensive alternative would be a polyurethane foam. That's why you will find it in many different industries across the world that utilize this material, because it's an inexpensive alternative for filling large voids or even creating end products straight out of the foam, because it is available in many different weight classes, hardnesses that you can utilize for your benefit. So whenever there is a weight concern, I always recommend my customers to think about the fact if they can use a polyurethane expanding foam for that. And like I said, we have some samples here where the weight is an issue. I'm going to grab one of those examples. This is a larger casting that we made here. This is a T-Rex or copy of a T-Rex skull. As you can see, I can handle this with one hand, more or less. It is a little bulky because it's so large. This is made with our feather light. So the skin on here, you see, it's a rigid feather light epoxy, or sorry, urethane plastic. But I'll show you the back of this here now. You can see that this is a foam. So instead of using a lot of material to make thick walls on our casting so it supports its weight, we filled it with a expanding polyurethane foam. This is the Foamit 4 Black. It has a lot of expansion to it. It's lightweight. I can easily handle it. And these little nubbits that you see here and here, there. So those are air vents where the foam came out. That's why this back is nice and flush, because we did have a pressure plate on this mold. So wherever you can utilize a product that's lightweight, that takes up a lot of space, you want to think about foam products. So this is just one example of a foam casting backing up for a lightweight application. A lot of
Milo?
places. Yeah, we got a question
interrupt
coming
you
in.
really quick. I have a question in chat. Luke wants to know, is there a sensible way to calculate what size opening to make when using foam to back up urethane without distortion?
Sorry, can you speak up? I can hardly hear you.
Luke is asking, is there a sensible way to calculate what size openings to make when using foam as backup?
Is there weight class? Is that what the question is? Like
Well,
which foam you would use?
No, like when you're doing like a backfill.
Yeah.
And you're putting the pressure behind it, like the openings. Is there any good way to calculate how big those openings should be, or how spaced out they should
Thank
be?
you for explaining that to me again. So we got a question came in. Is there a good way to determine how large the openings on your back pressure plate are going to be? So here we have a back pressure plate, and we have some openings. The question is, how large do these have to be? And there is not really a formula that I can tell you, and we will talk about these a little bit further down in the presentation, but just in a nutshell, there is a size that I would recommend based on the casting that you're making. If you make the holes too small and too few, the pressure building up inside the mold underneath that plate is going to be so large, it's going to make the material shoot up like a fountain out of the pressure plate, out of your mold, and potentially break the mold if you build up too much pressure. So there is a formula that I would recommend as far as size, and also there's placement, where you actually place the holes. So you're not going to place them in the middle of the casting. You usually want to put them around the perimeter. And again, we will get to that topic in depth a little bit further into our presentation. Very good question. There definitely is some logic behind the placement of those vents. Like I said, we will get to that a little bit further in our presentation. Thank you for that question. So going back to the application, when and why using polyurethane foams like this, whenever there's a weight issue and you're trying to create large display pieces, think about museums where they have sharks and whales hanging in the museum from the ceiling. If you made that out of heavy materials, it will have to have all kinds of supports to keep that in the air. But if you make it out of a lightweight product like foam, it's very strong and durable, you can reduce that weight and also not have to worry about all the construction you have to do now to support it. Many different applications for pieces like that. Here's another example I want to show you guys. So this is basically what it is. It's a texture casting. You will see this in hotels, in factory, in corporate buildings. They will have display pieces like this. This is actually taken straight off a tree. So they made a mold off a tree bark, then casted it in foam to be used as a display piece on a wall. Again, I'll turn this around so you guys can see. We have our vent spouts here, and there's one there. But you can see that this piece was casted very flat, so it was a very calculated mold. They did a good job on the design of the mold, and there was no bowing out. The casting didn't change in shapes. It kept its natural shape, so they did a good job in casting this foam. But you can see how foam replaces all kinds of different casting mediums, especially when you start applying it on a larger scale. And this is actually quite tough. This is very durable. I would say this is probably in the 17, 18 pound range, somewhere there. So there are different weights of foam available. They will have different finish hardness, so to say. The skin on it will have different hardnesses based on the material and the application. Remember, when you use that pressure plate, you are increasing the skin hardness of your casting, which we will talk about a little bit more down in our presentation. Again, if you guys see castings here that you're intrigued by, you have questions on, please feel free to let us know. Next thing up, soft props. You're creating props for the movie industry, and you need tools and props and weapons that cannot hurt your actors. It's something that's soft and flexible. You would usually opt out, let me set up. You will opt out for flexible casting materials such as foams. And again, these are available in different weight classes, so they can be harder or softer based on what you're trying to achieve. This is just one example of a soft movie prop. Here's a sword that you commonly see in movies, in theater, but this is flexible. This is a foam casting. So it will not hurt the actor themselves. It's very durable and very easy and economic to create using expanding foam products. So soft props are very commonly made out of expanding polyurethane foams. A couple other props I want to show you guys. We frequently go to shows and exhibition, and we always take some of our cinder blocks, these polyurethane expanding foam that's flexible, but looks very realistic. All the detail was captured from the mold, from the original model, and we're able to cast expanding polyurethane foam into a shape that looks like something that it's not. So it looks like a cinder block, but look, I can toss it around. It's very light, it's compressible, so if I hit my coworker, catch Alex, it will not hurt the actor. So keep that in mind. These materials make our everyday life easier and also safer by using these polyurethane expanding products. Something else that's commonly used with the expanding foams are archery targets. We have a couple of targets here. You can see here I have a nice beautiful peacock that's actually painted and finished. That is an archery target made out of the Flex Foamit 15. So very durable, very kind of hard, but yet still flexible. Now, in case you ask yourself, who would shoot peacocks with arrows and bows? We do. There's places in this world they shoot all kinds of different targets. That's just a foam target. So don't get upset over the peacock getting shot. Some more flexible foam props, a bat made out of a foam product, so soft and flexible, impact resistant, so it will not break easily when being used. It will also not hurt the actor unless they get one of these polyurethane rubber nails in their eye. So maybe we should just put this away and not play with it, huh? A couple of other industries that utilize polyurethane expanding foams on a large scale is the display industry as well as the movie industry. More specifically in the movie industry, if they're not making all kinds of body suits out of expanding soft foams, they create these mask holders. So here we have a beautiful lizard snake person. This is usually what I wear before I put my Milo face on. But they use these flexible foam placeholders for these movie props, prosthetics, rather said. So the prosthetics are made, and then they house them on these soft foam backings, and they lay out dozens and dozens of these for a single movie shoot. For every different facial expression that the actor has that has a mask on like this, they usually have some kind of prosthetic, and they store it on these foam backings. Now, when they're not using foam backings in the display industry, they will utilize rigid foams. Here's a mannequin head. This specific one is made for sculpting purposes. This is a rigid foam product. Now, it's super lightweight, so easy to handle. And if you look inside, it's actually hollow. So this material was rotocasted. That means when the foam was poured into a mold, they started spinning it in a 360-degree way. And then when it cured, basically what it did, it left a layer of the foam all around, but kept the piece actually hollow. So nice and strong and durable, lightweight, and very inexpensive. Thinking about the fact that it only took a cup of material to create this casting. So display industry would utilize this material on a large scale. We already touched up on the industrial settings, and what I'm thinking more specifically is the upholstery industry, mattress industry, automotive industry. Again, I have some samples here. Here we got a seat. This is from a little tractor, and you can see that this was actually casted. This is foam that was casted into a mold. There's the injection ports. It does have a polyurethane skin on it, but the backing material is foam. So this is exactly how they would utilize it in the automotive industry. They make the seats themselves out of polyurethane foam, which they then end up wrapping in either a vinyl or polyurethane coating. Even the steering wheel in your car, most of them are made out of an expanding foam that has a nice polyurethane coating on the outside. And on the same example here, I want to show you, this is a motorcycle seat that is unfinished. So this is what it would look like when it comes out of the mold. Actually, this is what it looks like when it comes out of the mold. It has all these little frays and drags that need to be cut off, but this is literally what it would come out of the mold like. So unfinished, and then you have a trimmed, where we trim it back, but you can see this is flexible, and once you wrap it in a vinyl or leather with a backing piece, this is what that seat then would end up looking like. So you have your vinyl cover, the foam is on the inside, it's nice and flexible, so you can sit on it. It's not too soft, so it won't squish too much when you sit on it. So you do want to choose specifically what material you're going to end up using, because if you use a very flexible material, really soft material, it will condense, compress too much, and will not really be good to utilize for that application. This is made by DC Plastics. This is one of our customers. They make these seats, and they actually created the mold. This is a rigid mold that they made for this seat. And for a demo for this section, we will actually go ahead and cast one of these seats so that you guys can see, number one, what a DIY rigid mold for casting of foams like this would look like. Secondly, to see how the material is handled when being utilized. So we're going to do that demonstration in a couple of minutes. In the meantime,
so Milo?
Yes.
Real quick, getting a few questions about which foams each of the pieces were that you were showing.
Okay.
Would it be possible to just kind of go back quick and show each and say, like, if we know which foam it is?
Can we go back and show which materials we're using? No going back. Hit the rewind button. So the seat itself here, this is made out of, so the question was, so you guys know, what are some of these objects made out of? This right here, this is made out of the Flex Foam at 7FR. Why the 7FR? It has the right density as far as the foam. Furthermore, the FR rating for the foam is a fire retardant rating. You're going to see that utilized whenever the final pieces that are being made are everyday objects that you and I would use, that you want to minimize any kind of fire exposure. That's not really what I'm looking for here. You want to minimize the fire spread by using a material that's fire retardant. That's the one. So you want to be cautious and understanding the material. These materials, polyurethanes, do burn quite a bit. They are polyurethanes. It's known a product that is combustible. So when you have a product that has a fire retardant in it, that's less likely to catch fire. Again, that's why it's mostly utilized in the automotive industry. If there is a car fire, we don't want the seats to burn really fast. We want them to actually extinguish or not catch fire at all. So some of the products that I already showed you what the foam densities are. Like the backer here, this is a very soft foam. I can see this being a flex foam at 3. It's quite soft, quite flexible. The cell structure, it's quite large. So I would identify this as a flex foam at 3. We do have many different foam products that can be utilized across different applications. It really comes down to what you're trying to do. Does the weight feel right? Does the compression feel right? Does the bounce back of the foam feel right? Those are all some questions that go into the equation as far as what foam works best for you. Now, we do have on our website a foam page, and even in our technical bulletins, we have a crosscut basically of all the different foams that shows you the expansion ratio on the flex foam side. It shows how flexible, how soft they are, or if they're even tough. Some of these are tough. So that is a starting point where I would start as far as how to determine. Of course, you guys can always give us a call, talk to one of the technical support people here, and they're going to channel you towards one or the other product based on your specific foam needs. Now this right here, this also feels very lightweight. The cell structure looks pretty big. This could be a flex foam at 4 or 5, possibly even a 3. There's no identification marker on this piece that tells me. The archery targets are very specific. Those are made using flex foam at 15. The flex foam at 15 is very tough and dense material, so that it has a self-healing property. So if you shoot these with arrows, the arrow is not just going to rip through the foam, but it has a self-healing property that's going to minimize that impact hole. So yes, if I'm choosing to make archery targets, then I would utilize something like the flex foam at 15. But again, I understand that when you're looking at the website, there's a lot of different materials that Smooth-On makes. The choices can be overwhelming. If you're not sure, we're just a phone call away. So don't hesitate to pick up the call, give us a call and talk about your specific project. We will try our best to narrow down which material you should be using. Thanks for that question. Again, keep them coming as we do in the presentation. I'd love to answer all your questions so that you don't feel like you couldn't get an answer to what you're working on. Going back to why and when you would use polyurethane expanding products, just to touch up on 2 more industries that utilize this hugely, that are very much overlooked. Number 1, boating industry. They will fill all kinds of voids in the boat, in the hull, the pontoons, all that gets to be filled with expanding polyurethane foam. This is great for pourable foams because you're usually dealing with enclosed spaces that you can't get to. If you pour expandable foam that's liquid, it can flow into those spaces, rise out, and fill that void completely. Another commonly overlooked industry that utilizes a lot of foam is the shipping and packaging industry. More specific on the shipping, think about sensitive electronic components. Think about large or medium-sized motors that need to be protected from impact. A lot of times, companies would do special packaging on these expensive products where they fill a bag with foam, set it into a box, set your electronic, your machine, your motor into that. The foam forms around it. They do the same again from the top, fill the bag with foam, stuff it around, close the bag. Now that product that you're trying to ship lives securely in the center, surrounded by a ball or rectangle, square of foam, so that if you do drop it, if it does get tossed and kicked and thrown overboard or whatever, it does not impact the sensitive item that is inside the box. Furthermore, the food display industry will utilize foams a lot. I don't know if you guys seen this. These are squishy food items, a cupcake and a donut, that utilize expanding polyurethane foams for the creation. So you can squeeze them and they bounce right back to their original shape. So polyurethane foams, a lot of times you're going to see them utilized in display for food, more so in bakeries than other food applications, because the foam itself, when it expands, it just has that natural look of bread and bread products. So food industry will utilize this greatly as well. All right, so that brings us to our next demo. I am going to show you the casting of the FlexFoamit 7FR into that motorcycle seat mold. We did get that mold from the original maker. Just going to set up my stuff here real quick. So let's just quickly examine the mold here. We're going to be casting the FlexFoamit 7FR into this mold. This is a rigid mold. There's no silicone on here. It is made out of epoxy and wood. We have these cross beams, I guess you can call them. These will strap down and hold down the lid to our mold. When foams expand, they do have a lot of force. And in order to make this lid stay down and won't let it expand and deform our casting, we're going to close the mold, strap it in, and let the material expand. One thing you might notice, there is no air vents on this mold on the top here, and that is by purpose. When the material rises out of the mold and pushes against the mold walls inside the mold, on the side, the bottom, and the top, it actually, once it pushes against that surface, it starts pushing back inside that mold, creating a much denser final casting that you would have in case that mold was just left open and the material was free rising. So I'm going to set this aside real quick, and we're going to get to our favorite part of the show, which is mixing of material. Again, I'm going to protect myself by wearing some gloves and my eye protection for safety. Put that aside. Now again, we're casting the FlexFoamit 7FR. Before I start dispensing any of the material and show you how I go about pre-mixing the stuff and mixing it and all that, one question that comes up very often for us here is, how much material do I need to fill a void? How much material do I need to fill that mold that I'm casting? There's two ways to go about it. You can either cast into the mold and keep a close eye as far as how much material you're using. If the mold is short, you know that you need to fill up more. If the mold is too much and it expands out of it, then you know that you have too much. And you can dial that in. Furthermore, you can go to our website, smoothdon.com. There is a materials calculator for casting, for mold making, for laminating, all that stuff. Use that material calculator, select the material that you want to use for your casting, It's going to ask you for a couple pieces of information. How large is the void that you're trying to fill? You're going to have to do some math, put that in, and that's going to then give you an approximation of how much material you would enter into that cavity, how much material you would take to mix that quantity to fill it completely. Now, we're not going to do either one of those. Why? Well, there is a really nice mold maker and caster who made this mold, and that person went the extra step. Ta-da! See inside there? Can we zoom in on that? So this mold maker actually went the extra step. He wrote down first which material we're using. So here we have Flex Foam at 7FR. He told us that we need 17 ounces of A and 17 ounces of B, liquid ounces. So he already told us, whoever made this mold told us this much amount of material goes into this mold. Also, they gave us a warning, a heads up, East Release 2831 on all tool surfaces. So this is a great thing where you can help not only the next user of that mold, but yourself. If you already discover how much material it takes to cast this part specifically, note it. Put it on your mold so that when you have to cast this piece again in 6 months, in a year, in 2 years, you can go back to that mold. It tells you right there, I need this and this. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to go into websites. It's just
Milo,
right
I'm
at
just
your
going to interrupt
fingertips.
with another question quick.
Yes, go ahead.
I might have missed it. The mold itself, what is that made from?
This mold, what is it made out of? This mold is made out of, obviously, wood. We got plywood parts here. The inside of the mold is made out of epoxy gray. This is our laminating, or rather said, this is our, what do you call that coat? Gel coat, thank you. Man, English is so tough today. So this is our gel coat epoxy gray. It is available in a couple of different colors, including a neutral color that you can pigment yourself. This is the epoxy gray. It is backed up with, again, this is epoxy gray on the inside. This is the epoxamite laminating epoxy with glass fiber. You can clearly see the glass fibers throughout the pattern here. So this is glass fibers with the laminating epoxy on top of the epoxy gray. Here we have an epoxy putty. To me, this looks very much like freeform air that is holding a wooden piece that is screwed into a hinge that's screwed into the bottom part of our mold, makes our mold accessible, easier to use. So you can see that many different epoxy products went into making this mold. Don't think that you got to use only one product. You use multiple materials to achieve what you're trying to make. And in this case, a couple of different epoxy products. Good question. Again, a topic that we will get into a little bit further in our presentation, but I am trying to answer your questions as they come in. So for this, we're using the Flex Foam at 7FR. Maybe like this, looks better. We got our A, our B. This is a by volume product, so we don't need to use a gram scale. We can just use cups and dispense it by volume. Now, when you are using these products, I will stress the fact that you should follow the instructions for these materials. As you can see here, there's a label. There's a label here as well. And if that's not visible enough for you and you decide by some cosmic chance that you're going to read the technical bulletin, we're going to tell you in the technical bulletin again, make sure that you premix the material as instructed. So to show you guys what I do with these material before I go to use them, I'm just going to go ahead and premix this. So give it a good shake. And even though I'm not James Bond, I do like my foams shaken, not stirred. Part A, premixed thoroughly. Already I noticed that this part A is more liquid than the part B, just by premixing. All right. So we premixed our material. The first thing that I'm going to tell you, you just worked in a lot of air into that material. And while we usually don't want to trap air in our castings, this is the one material where I will tell you that whipping air into the material is actually better for your casting. We dispense our part B first. And before you even ask, how do I know this is 17 liquid ounces of material? I just do. This is a 10-ounce cup. This is a 7-ounce cup. When you work in the industry and you utilize these things, you get to know the quantities of material that you utilize and that you're using. Let's go ahead and dispense this as well, so we don't have to do it after we premix our part B. Again, this is by volume. No gram scale is necessary. And because we have very limited space here today, I'm going to put this away. Grab my mixing container. And our mixing apparatus. In this case, I'm using a mechanical mixer. This is a battery powered drill with a turbine mixer, or paddle mixer actually. This is a paddle mixer. This is the green meanie from Smooth On. You can find on our website as well. Grab a couple mixing sticks. Now, one thing before I even start mixing that I want to be aware about, again, going back to that technical bulletin that's so important when you work with new product, is understanding the material. So what I'm trying to say is know the working time, the cure time of the material, and everything else that we recommend in that technical bulletin is very helpful information. So knowing that this material has 30 seconds of work time, how many? Did you just say 30 seconds? Yes, I said 30 seconds. I understand that I need to work fast when handling this material. So once the A and B come in contact, we have 30 seconds to mix the material, get it inside the mold, and strap the mold down. Now, following the technical bulletin instructions, it calls for pre-mixing. So after we pre-mixed in the original container, after we pre-mixed the material in the original container, it calls for the mechanical pre-mixing of the part B with a paddle mixer in your mixing container. All right, so just so we understand what's going on here, why are we pre-mixing this part B with the mechanical mixer? So what we're trying to do is we're trying to whip in more air into the part B. Also, it's going to give us a more uniformed cell structure once the material starts to expand. Therefore, the overall strength of the material is going to be much better, and it's going to have a nicer finish to it. So pre-mix the part B with a mechanical mixer before dispensing the part A, and we're going to start our mold making dance. Forgot the glasses. Make sure you put the glasses on. And here we go. We're going to start mixing the part A, and that time is ticking. We got 30 seconds to combine the two products together. So don't delay. Start the mixing process. Scrape the sides, scrape the bottom, even with the mixing. We're going to come back with a mixing stick, scrape the sides, scrape the bottom one more time, and then we're going to get our mold ready. Material is poured into the mold. Scrape the extra material in there too. And the material is actually starting to expand already, so you really have to get going and make sure that you work fast when handling expanding polyurethane flexible foams. Strap this down with clamps. And like I said, we're going to start the foam dance. Grab my mold, and we're going to spin it around. Why am I doing this? I don't know, it feels good. No, the reason why we're spinning the mold around is to spread the material across all the surfaces inside the mold. So when the material starts to rise in the mold, it usually starts to rise from the bottom up. In this case, it's going to start to rise from all sides, from the top, from the bottom, from each side, because we have a layer of material all around the mold. Now remember, 30 seconds of work time of this product. And I just want to keep this up here because we're going to start seeing the material escape the mold, as you can see here. Can we zoom in on that? This is just the beginning of the process. So right there, thank you.
So Milo, can I interrupt? I have a couple of questions about casting foam.
We can hear the mold cracking. No, that's the material expanding. Go ahead. Again, if you can just zoom out on this. We got a couple of questions.
So,
I just want to point out to the material now coming out of the sides of the mold. Go ahead.
Yeah, so a couple of questions that we've had. Can you speak to casting foam in very thin sections? Any specific considerations for that? And then also rotocasting foam.
Okay, so we got two questions here. Casting foam in thin sections and also rotocasting foam. Man, it's hot in here. So rotocasting foams, absolutely. Handle the foam while it's still in its liquid state where it's not starting to expand. That's your best choice. Again, going back to this example here, this was actually rotocasted. This was poured into a mold, and the mold was spun around until the material actually fully set up. The mold was removed, and you can see inside here, there you go. So this is a hollow piece. Thank you. You can see the mold, the casting wall in here, but then inside it's all hollow. So that's what a rotational casted piece would look like made with foam. So can you use it? Absolutely. Just keep in mind, if you don't have a skin on the outside of your casting that's rigid, I'll give you an example of that. Where are you, alien? Oh, there he is. So you have a rigid skin on the outside of your casting and then backfill it with foam. Keep in mind, if you don't have that skin, that the finish of your casting might not be as detailed. So the foam cell structure is not as good as some plastics, like urethane plastics, that capture all the detail. Keep in mind, the smaller the cell structure of the foam that you're using, the more detail you're going to capture. If you're using a back pressure plate on your mold, the more detail you're going to capture out of that mold. And the other question was, can you pour foam in very thin sheets? The answer to that is yes, absolutely. You just got to be aware of the direction that the foam is traveling as it's curing. So are you going to, more examples here. Are you going to cast something that's flat like that? You want to make sure you understand where the pressure is going to build up, where you need to put your air vent holes. There you go. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it before making that mold. Also, you want to make sure that the mold itself is strong enough to support the pressure that builds up inside that mold as the mold material expands, as the casting material expands. It can deform molds, and we're going to see that a little bit further in our presentation. In general, when you are buying foam, let's say in sheets, here we have an example. Oh. So this is a sheet of foam that's very thin application. This is used for packaging. So something like this will not be made in this thin of a cross section. They actually make a much thicker piece like this, or even bigger, a huge rectangle, and then they slice it. They will use a slicing machine to slice that in thin section to create castings or end pieces like this. So when you see pieces like this, usually they're sliced out of a large piece. Can you make them yourself? Absolutely. You just have to understand the material properties, how the material works, how it travels into molds, how it expands out of those molds, and how to set up those molds for your success. Again, if you have more detailed questions about the, let's say, mold setup, feel free to use that technical website on the Smooth On website to let us know what questions you have more specifically. Can we just quickly take a look at this mold here? We have material that has now come out of the sides here all around. So this mold itself was created without any air vents anywhere, with the understanding that the material will come out on the sides of our mold. This material takes 2 hours to set up. It's still a little tacky. So we're going to put this mold aside, let the material fully cure. By the time we finish this presentation, I will come back and open this mold for you guys so you can see also what it takes to open the mold. It's not as easy and simple as we might think it may be. So put this aside for now. All right. We're going to jump into the next section of our presentation here, which is the release agents for polyurethane foams. And for that, I'm going to have a couple things here. So as you may know, polyurethane expanding foams, as the name says, are made out of polyurethane. One thing that I know about polyurethane products is they are extremely adhesive. They stick to many, many different things, and even when you don't want them to stick, they stick. So when you are casting polyurethane expanding foams, you want to use the correct release agent for the material. Why? Besides it being very adhesive and sticking to many things, different release agents have different effects on the foam itself. So if you use the wrong release agent, or you use a release agent by itself, like the universal, that can actually collapse the mold. So the casting coming out of that mold can actually collapse on itself. Why? The chemical composition of a release agent like the universal will have interaction with the foam itself and will collapse it when it goes to expand. So we want to be understanding as far as what products work for the application for expanding polyurethane foams. And the material that we use, or the release agent that we use, is called East Release 2831. So one thing that you might realize immediately when looking at this can, this is a liquid release agent, whereby the universal is an aerosol. So again, following the instructions stated clearly on the material container. Shake well. So we want to make sure that we follow those instructions the best we can and pre-mix the product, because it does settle out. And we want to bring anything that's on the bottom of that can back into the rest of the liquids. And we're going to do a little demo on this where we apply some East Release 2831 to a back pressure plate. Before we do that, a couple other things I want to mention. Universal release agent will collapse the foam. So if you use this by itself, it will collapse the foam in your mold that you're casting. There are exceptions, of course. When you're casting expanding foams in rigid molds, every once in a while you just don't have that release property that the 2831 on its own can give you. And in that case, we want to use something called the universal release agent, followed up by 2 applications of the 2831. So you're going to do a application of the universal release, extremely important, followed up by the 2831. Otherwise, you're going to have a collapsing foam in your mold. So that's the only time that you would utilize the universal release agent on expanding polyurethane foam. Now, when is the release agent not necessary at all? Is when you're using silicone-made mold. So if your mold is made out of silicone, then there is no need for the release agent in the mold. But you still might be using a back pressure plate made out of melamine board or something like that, and that's when you do want to utilize it. And on that note, I do want to show you guys, again, going to the back pressure plate. This is pretty much what that would look like. So this can be made out of many different products. In this case, this is melamine board. So this is melamine wood here, melamine coating. And one thing that I personally understand about melamine melamine particles, the wood particles are very porous. So while the surface itself is not porous, the side, the particles that are making up the core of this material, these are extremely porous. And therefore, these little vent holes are going to be porous as well. So the inside here of this vent hole is going to be extremely porous, and we want to make sure that we utilize something like sonite wax to seal that. So we want to seal those so that the foam itself cannot travel into the porosity of the melamine. And for that, the sonite wax is a great material to use. You can use also something like petroleum jelly. I have the sonite wax always around my workbench as just a good material to have. And we're going to place a nice thick layer of it on the inside. There you go, that's better. In order to seal the porosity of that particle board. Now, I'm not doing that on the inside. Here as well, there's a big chips of it, of the melamine missing, so all that receives a layer of the sonite wax to seal it. And once you seal it with the sonite wax, now you can go on the edge here too if you needed to, but I just don't see the foam expanding that far. It's not necessary. Once you apply the sonite wax, we'll put that away. Now we're going to dispense some of the East Release 2831 into a container. I've already used this earlier to put release agent onto the mold we just used, the motorcycle seat mold. And then we're simply going to brush the liquid release agent over all the surfaces that we anticipate getting some foam onto, and then we want to release, obviously. So this is the back of our back pressure plate. This is where the material comes out. This is the front of it, or this is the lower half where that goes towards the mold. This is actually the more important half that we want to put the release agent on. Now, I am putting this on with a chip brush, regular chip brush you can get at the hardware store. You can use a spritzer bottle. I just like the brush application better because I have more control as far as where the release agent is being put on. Well, very easy, very simple application of the release agent, and very inexpensive assurance that the material won't stick to the surface where you apply this to. Now, when you do apply a release agent like that, we're going to put that aside and let it dry for 5 to 10 minutes before putting it to use. One thing to note whenever applying release agents, don't over apply them. Don't apply so much release that it's running off of the surface. Don't allow it to pool in the lowest section of your mold. It will soak into the mold. It will cause issues with the casting material. So, word of precaution: don't let the release agents build up in the mold. So we're going to set that aside, let that dry for our next presentation, where we will use it for a back pressure application. We can put these aside and focus on the next section of our demonstration. All right, and we're going to quickly talk about the difference between closed cell foams and open cell foams. Now, as you might be aware and heard this, if you are online, if you're on YouTube and you're looking these materials up, by now you would have realized there is an open cell foam and there's a closed cell foam. And I want to talk about it and kind of take some of the mystery out of it so you guys have a better understanding of what that is. Alex, if you can show us that picture, thank you. So here we have an extreme close-up of a foam cell. On the left, you have the open cell. On the right is the closed cell. Now, what is the major difference you can tell here? The open cell foam has basically no cell walls. The walls have collapsed. There's an open space, and just the space in between the cells is remaining, creating a grid, a web kind of structure. Now, on the right side, you see the closed cell foam. You actually see the cells intact. The cell walls are intact. The entire cell structure is there. It's not just the outline of it, but rather the whole structure. That is basically what an open cell versus a closed cell foam would look like. Now, what's the biggest difference between these two? If you think in logic ways, if you think about material passing, it's the fact that open cell foams allow material to pass in and out. They move in and out of that product, whereby closed cells, there's a cell wall, the material cannot penetrate, it cannot travel through there, and will not allow the material to basically soak up or travel through the closed cell foam. So that's basically what the two differentiations are. Now, the products that Smooth-On makes, the closed cell foam that Smooth-On makes is actually hard foam, so it's a rigid product, whereby the open cell structures that we manufacture is the flexible foam. Makes sense, right? When you squeeze it, the air travels in and out, making the foam flexible. Well, there's a little twist to that. The Smooth-On flexible foams are actually a combination. It's a hybrid between open cell and closed cell foam. While the skin on the flexible foam looks really nice and captures a lot of detail, the interior is all open and air can travel in and out easily, which makes our foams also self-skinning. We can go back to our screen. The self-skinning feature of our molds is also due to the fact that we utilize back pressure plates on most of the casting. That gives us a much nicer casting in the final result. Alex, can you please show us the back pressure plate video that we got lined up? So on our YouTube channel, there is a video where one of my coworkers, he actually demonstrates the application of a back pressure plate and what it does. So you can see there how the material reacts and fills the cavity of the mold. It finally makes its way out to the openings of the cavity, not only giving us a good casting on all around, but once you remove the excess foam here, you can see that the casting itself coming out of that mold has a nice surface finish to it. So once we peel this out, I believe that's Jack Nicholson laughing at us there. So nice closed, nice finish on that with the back pressure plate, whereby on the right, without the back pressure plate, you have a lot of large openings and voids that you can actually see with the eye. So that shows you that by simply using a back pressure plate, you can achieve a much better finish to your castings when they're made with foam. Now, to demonstrate that, I do have some Foam It 4 Black. This is a rigid material. This is, by the way, the only foam that comes already pigmented from Smooth On and comes in a black color. All the other foams have their natural color to them. Always pre-mix the material. This is not even opened. Somebody was slacking on the job. And again, before you guys ask, how do I know how much material goes into this mold that we're filling? I've done this so many times on this specific mold that I've already tuned in as far as how much material goes in. Now, the Foam It 4 Black is, first of all, a rigid material, but it is a 1-to-1 mix ratio by volume. So we try to make this as convenient, as easy on the end user as possible, so they're not stuck with a material that's difficult to use, but rather makes it easier. One thing I wanted to point out, the mold here that I'm using is already pre-primed. What does that mean? I used a primer spray. I sprayed it into the mold, and now when we cast into that mold, it's going to lift all that primer that's already in the mold. Why would you do something like this? It's very simple. It makes the painting of the final casting much easier than if you were, say, to prime it after you cast it. A lot of different spray paints and paints have solvents in them that can eat foams and melt foams. In this case, if you prime the mold, silicone mold beforehand, once you get that casting out, it's already primed. So let's go ahead and mix some foams, and we're going to put a back pressure plate to that as well. See how that works. I want to point out some, I would say, inefficiencies with doing this by hand, the back pressure mold, that is, back pressure plate. So as we know, the material, when it expands, it creates a lot of pressure, and that pressure has to go somewhere. And in case you don't strap down your back pressure plate thoroughly, that pressure has to go somewhere. It's going to either lift the back pressure plate out and off, or it's going to push back into the mold. I'll scrape the sides, scrape the bottom of your mixing container. Uh-oh. Stop everything. I'm not using my safety glasses. Okay, we're good now. Remember, safety first. All right, so we mixed our material. And we can go ahead and pour it into the mold. And unlike any other material that we tell you to pour into one spot, I actually poured the foam all over to get a coating of foam on all surfaces as much as possible. Again, that will give us a nice skin on our casting. And again, here I'm just tilting the mold around, making sure I get good coverage on all the surfaces as much as we can. And I can tell the foam is already expanding, so I'm going to leave this alone. Grab my back pressure plate. And going back to that question about placement of the vents, everybody's a little different. Everybody's going to place those vents in different spots. I think the most important is that the vents are not too small, so you can see that these are about 1 inch wide, and that's based on the overall size of the piece that I'm making. You don't want to make the holes too small, otherwise you're putting a lot of back pressure on that mold and on that plate. So there is a fine line when the holes are too big. And also I place the holes around the perimeter, kind of, not right in the middle. And that's so that it fills the middle and then pushes the material to the sides. And you can see here, if we look at that, the material is expanding. It's just about reached the top of the mold itself. We got a couple more seconds we can spare before we put the plate on. And it's just about reaching the top. We're going to put this now on and put some pressure onto the back. And we can actually now watch as the material starts to creep out of the vent hole slowly. I didn't put too much material in here so it won't be shooting out like a fountain, but your goal is to have just enough material so it fills the hole without overfilling. And the material is now, I can see it slowly rising out of those vent holes. It's pushing to the sides, and it's coming out now out of the vent hole to the side. And I'm pushing down on this quite firmly. I'm trying not to make it distort the casting. So actually, this quantity was just perfect. It filled the mold without too much overflow. You can see a little bit of material right here. And just when you think the material is set up and you let go of your casting, it actually continues to cure and expand. So there is a working time, and you can actually see if we can get a camera on the side a little here. No, we can't. Okay. So the material is actually at this point lifting up that plate. So the plate is starting to get lifted because there is not enough pressure holding it down. I'm just not too strong. But that's basically the application of a back pressure plate. This material takes 2 hours to cure. So while this is curing, we're going to set it on the side. We're going to come back to it in a little bit and actually demold this casting when we start talking about the painting of these castings. There is a painting section that we're going to chat about, and I'm going to show you what this looks like when it's demolded. Put that aside right now. All right. Now, next I want to talk about rigid versus flexible versus silicone foams. So Smooth-On makes 3 types of different foam products. We have the Foam-It series, we have the Flex Foam-It series, and we have Soma Foma. The Foam-It series is the rigid foam. So once you cure it, once it sets up, it cures to a rigid finish. Again, the Foam-It 4 Black here, as you can see, once it's cured, is fully rigid. And just so that doesn't melt into the background of my apron, here's the Foam-It 3. This is the natural color of the foam. As it cures, it will turn this beige color. The Foam-It 4 Black is the only one that was actually pigmented. Now note the little lines at the bottom. That's how much material was filled into the cups. the rest of the material just expanded. So you can see how they fill a large void by using the correct material. Now the Foamit 3 specifically here has the most expansion, therefore the biggest cell structure of the rigid foams. Therefore it's also the easiest to impact. So it has large cell structure, but because of that, it's one of the softest rigid foams that we have. So you can see how easy I was able to put indents in that, whereby the Foamit 4 Black is not that easy. You can see that I'm struggling to put any kind of indents in it because it has a tighter cell structure and a larger weight ratio. Now, what is another rigid expanding foam that Smooth-On makes that does not fit into the Foamit series? It's the Easy Spray foam. Now, the Easy Spray foam is specifically developed for the Easy Spray Junior gun. This is a dispensing apparatus for Smooth-On products. We only have one product, the Easy Spray foam, that is designated as a foam product for the Easy Spray Junior dispensing system. Now, why would you use an Easy Spray system? It's much more convenient when mixing and applying large amounts of material on large projects. I'm going to show you that apparatus in a second. Get quite thirsty when you talk a lot and it's warm in here. Let's talk about the Flex Foamit series. Flexible foams, so it's distinguished by the flex in front of the Foamit. So we have the Foamit, which is rigid. Flex Foamit is the flexible foam that Smooth-On makes. Like the name says, they are flexible by design. So you can squeeze these quite easily depending on what the product is, and they rebound back to their original shape quite easily and nicely. This is Flex Foamit 3. Wrote that down. And again, you can see how much material was actually poured into the container. The rest is all expansion and air in between. So that's the Flex Foamit series. And again, these are available in different weight classes. Oh, this is rigid, never mind. But this is flexible. And so is this. Flex Foamit 15, Flex Foamit 10. So the Flex Foamit 10 has a little bit more expansion ratio than the 15. The 15 has a much closer, denser cell structure. So therefore, the material itself is quite dense, whereby the Flex Foamit 10, you can see that easily I can press into it, whereby the 3 is even softer and quite easy to flex actually. So based on the material weight that you choose, the material itself is going to have quite a different softness or hardness to it. So different materials available for the different project applications that you have in mind for your project. Finally, the Soma Foma is a very specific material that is actually made out of silicone, like the name says it in the name, Soma, silicone foam, Soma Foma. This is a very dense material. It comes in a 15 and a 25. Soma Foma is very squishy, yet it retains its original shape that you cast it in. And it's commonly used in the movie industry, pop making industry, as well as the medical simulation industry. One prop that we have here that's made with Soma Foma is these little marshmallow guys from the, what is that? Ghostbusters movie? Thank you. It just tells you how much I watch that stuff. So a couple of soft little guys here made out of Soma Foma. Very bouncy, very soft and squishy, yet very durable, made out of the Soma Foma. Again, this is a toy prop, I guess you can call it. But in the real world, you will see this material being utilized a lot in the mask movie industry and also the medical simulation. One thing I like about this product, believe it or not, It has a very nice smell to it, if you like this. And also, it bounces very nicely for a foam product. So very unique material, Soma Foam. Now, something that you want to keep in mind and why you would use a product like Soma Foam, if you're trying to bond a foam to, let's say, a mask or a prosthetic, you're filling a prosthetic with a foam, and you want that foam to bond to the mask, and the mask is made out of silicone, you would want to use a silicone-based foam. If you utilize a foam that's made out of urethane, it's not going to bond to that mask. So there is a benefit in using a silicone foam based on what you're trying to achieve. Now, I do want to show you guys what that Easy Spray Junior setup looks like, and also why you would use something like this. So here we have a Easy Spray Junior setup. This is the dispensing apparatus. It is a pneumatic tool, so air builds up in this piston here. It pushes the pistons out into the cartridge, and that gets pushed out into the mixing nozzle. This is the mixing nozzle. So all your mixing takes place in this nozzle. By the time material exits the nozzle, it's already mixed and ready to use. And we did have a little video prepared for you to show you how this is used on large scale project. Alex, if we can play that. So here we have one of my coworkers spraying panels. These are panels for our lobby here at Smooth On. Also our distributors, a couple of our distributors have these built in their lobbies. You can see, first of all, that mold is already primed with a gray primer. And instead of mixing the foam and pouring it into the large mold, we're simply atomizing it. We're spraying it into a mold with a very fine mist, which spreads the material over a large surface. So instead of casting the foam in a thick sheet, we're spraying a light mist that then expands into the final foam. This is really great and helpful when you're working on large-scale projects. So if you think about theme parks, oh, great camera work there. If you're thinking about theme parks and all the builds that they have, all the props they have to make, this is very helpful for them, where they can just simply put the cartridge into a dispensing apparatus and just pull the trigger and start mixing and applying the material without going through the pain of pre-mixing and then also mixing the material and pouring it. So it eliminates all that when you have it ready to go in an Easy Spray Junior setup like this. So this is kind of what you would see in the insulation foam application, where they mix and spray the foam and it expands into a cavity, except this has a little bit longer working time. So instead of a 3-second work time, the Easy Spray Foam, I believe, has a 5 or 10-second work time. So once it hits the mold, it takes about 5 to 10 seconds for it to start expanding. And you can see that my coworkers, they're hitting that mold from different angles, making sure that he gets an even layer on all the surfaces. So when the casting comes out, we have a solid casting of foam sheet. So that's the Easy Spray Junior system. Again, a very easy way to apply products on a large scale. You wouldn't use this if you're making a one-time mold or one-time casting with foam. This is what you would utilize on large-scale productions. All right, so if there's no questions, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about what type of molding products and mold designs work best for foam products. So we talked a little bit about silicone molds. We have silicones that Smooth On manufactures that are tin-based and that are platinum-based. And if you understand the chemistries between those two, you know that the tin-based silicones do contain alcohol in them that evaporates as the mold cures, whereby platinum silicones, addition silicones, don't have that. They just cure with the heat that surrounds them or the heat that you introduce to them. So there's no off-gassing of alcohol going on in the platinum silicones. Now, the beauty about using silicone molds for casting of foams is the fact that you don't utilize a release agent. So you don't have a release agent present on your casting, which is really nice if you're planning to paint the mold, paint the casting in any way. You don't have to worry about removing that release agent. So an example of that, I want to show you. We have a couple of different mold setups here that I prepped. And whenever I make molds, I want to make sure that they are strong and durable, especially when making them for casting of foams. So here's a bit larger mold that I want to show you guys. This is a Rebound 25 mold. This is a brush-on mold. Sorry, let me take this off. Whew, look at that. There's a mold inside a mold. Put that down here. One thing I wanted to point out also, I already made the back pressure plate for this mold, and furthermore, I built the back pressure plate inside the mold so that it always fits, because I knew I was going to do foam back fillings on this casting, so I already built the back pressure plate into my mold, placing those vent holes on the sides. Actually, this goes the other way. Nope. Let's try that one more time. There you go. So the vent holes are on each side of the mold, and the idea is that the material comes to the center as it rises. It comes to the center, pushes sideways, and then fills all the sides before coming out on the side of the back pressure plate. But one thing I want to go back to is the fact that the mold is made out of a platinum silicone, so that means we don't require a release agent when casting into this mold. But going into the mold itself, note that this mold does have a support shell. So this is made using a epoxy support shell. Just to be more specific, this is a lamination of epoxy coat gray, freeform air, and then finally glass fiber and epoxamide, so laminating. So this is a sandwich of epoxy, epoxy coat, freeform air, epoxamide with glass fiber. Furthermore, if that is not strong enough, you want to think about adding some reinforcements to your support shell in general. In this case here, we have these wood, or better say, what are they? It's not compressed board, it's particle board? What's the more expensive one that we build everything out of in this? I'm having a little brain fart here. So using wood structures like this is laminated wood. You can use conduit piping. You can use, in this case, also glass fibers to reinforce. But this structure right here, it's not only there to help me hold the mold and handle it when I'm handling the mold, but it's also reinforcing the entire structure up and down. It's stiffening the overall structure of that support shell that is built onto, so that no parts of this support shell actually going to bend and flex when the mold is in use. So these are not only for help for handling the mold by being grips, but they're also there to help me set the mold on, have it nice and leveled, and furthermore to reinforce the overall structure. Like I said, we commonly used conduit piping, which is very lightweight yet strong, easy to form to the shape of your molds, and easy to embed using some either epoxy putty, or in this case, like I used, glass fiber and laminating epoxy. So this is a mold that was thought through with the understanding that the final casting material, backing material, will be expanding foam. And I didn't want the expanding foam to potentially break the support shell. So make sure that you reinforce your molds. Now, what can happen if you don't have a strong support shell or a strong mold? There's actually issues that can come from the material expanding in your mold, and I do have a couple examples here I want to show you. Put some of these aside. So here is an application where an expanding material was used in a block mold. This block mold did not have a support shell. Furthermore, the smart mold maker who was casting into this didn't even bother using any wooden boards to compress before putting the rubber bands on. I'm going to talk to him later about that. What happened is the material started to expand in the mold. It reached the top. It's an open back mold. It started expanding. This started to set up. So the top of the material started to harden and set up as the work time expires. And what that does, it stops the material from freely flowing up. So it kind of acts like a back pressure plate. Because the material has a 2-hour working time, it was able to then start curing inside the mold, start continuing to pushing inside the mold, and finally distorted the mold itself, creating a opening on the side of the casting and then leaking out of the mold. So not only do we have a leak out of the mold, but I can tell that that casting is distorted for sure, because also the sides of the mold bow out. So you can see what can happen if you don't put enough thought in the process of handling the material. The product itself can distort the casting, distort the mold, and render your casting useless. So be aware of that aspect of the material when you're using an existing mold or rather you're making a mold. You want to make sure that they're strong and durable to support that pressure that builds up inside the mold. I do have a little bit of an embarrassing example for that.
Hey Milo, real quick before you put that mold away, I have 2 questions from chat.
We're not putting anything away. What do you got?
You did just put it away. You literally
I didn't put anything away. Here it is.
Somebody in chat wants to know what that's a mold of, and I want to know, were you the person who made that mold?
Okay. So what is the mold of? That's easy to answer because we're going to get the casting out of it. Who made the mold? I have no idea, to be honest with you. This mold has been here for the longest time that I can think of. I can tell you who strapped the mold into these straps and make it bow out when he cast it into it. That was me. Why? I wanted to give you guys a good example of what not to do when casting expanding polyurethane foams. This is actually trapped inside the foam. We're going to break that off. Let's see what this mold is hiding. All right. So, there we go. Here's our casting out of this mold. Put that aside. So, while we still captured most of the shape of the sculpture itself and what it is, it's a lady and a gentleman. Oh, this actually looks like, what's his name? What's his name? He wears a lion. Hercules. Come on, you guys don't know your ancient Greek history? So Hercules on the front side and his lovely lady with no nose on the back. Not sure what happened there. But the distortion is on the side of the casting here. So this blew up. Added 1/2 inch to our casting in general. Could we save this casting? Potentially. If we remove all this and then resculpt this area, we could potentially save it. But the idea is that you do want to think about the fact that expanding foams do distort castings, they do break molds if they're not well thought through. I just love the way her nose is shaped. All right, we're going to move her aside. I'm going to store it in our storage bin. And then we're going to get to the embarrassing example of Milo's mold making. Because you know, we all make mistakes. So here we have a mold of this lovely Thor hammer that we made here for our showroom, for our distributors. So if you go into one of the Reynolds distributors, you're most likely going to see a prop Thor hammer that's made out of flexible foam. It has a urethane coating on it. We made that here in-house. More specifically, I made it. And in the process of making these hammers, I broke this mold. How did I do that? I poured the foam inside, I walked away, and next thing you know, there was a pop! And from the other side of the workshop, I already knew what happened. The mold itself broke, the support shelves broke because it was not strong enough to withstand the pressure buildup inside this lower section. So here you can see a large patch of discoloration, and what that is, here you can see the actual fibers of the glass fiber. That's thick, heavy glass fiber. So I ended up repairing this with some epoxy and glass fibers. This whole section cracked from this side all the way in, and then if that wasn't enough, here on the side, oh look at that, somebody wrote down the quantities for that mold. Very smart. So this section here, this section broke off completely. You can see again, actually you can see the crack in there a little bit, but that's epoxy and glass fibers embedded. So just so you understand what happened here, we have our casting. You can zoom out a little bit. Great. So this is our casting. This is our mold, right? We poured the foam inside the mold. It traveled all the way down into this large cavity. Once it got built up in this cavity, the mold, the foam then started to shoot out to the vent, I guess. This is the handle, but that's the only opening to the top of the mold. So it started to make its way out. Once it got to the top here, the foam started to solidify already. And once that solidification takes place, there's no more way of traveling upwards. So where does it go? It goes sideways. Right? So this large mass of foam was held back by this shaft, no pun intended, and stopped it from traveling out, so it started expanding in the bottom. And there's a large mass here, and because there's so much mass, it built up so much pressure that it ultimately ended up breaking a rigid freeform air support shell. So the second mold I made off of this hammer, needless to say, received a full jacket of epoxy and glass fibers to make sure that these things don't happen again. So you can see that poor planning can lead to more work and, in this case, mold destruction, but we're able to save this and utilize it still, and we still actually make Thor hammers coming out of that mold. Can you believe I can actually pick this up? And it's soft enough that it won't hurt your actors, your friends, your family members, or your dog. So, we did have a nice little video that we found on Instagram that shows a mold exploding because it was overfilled. But we cannot show you this because we do not have the video rights to it, I guess. We can't just show videos on here. But one thing that I wanted to mention is that mold did not have proper support. It was a large mold. The foam was poured into it in one shot. So all that foam, once it started to expand, it had no place to go. The air vents for the back pressure plate were tiny. It was shooting out like a fountain, and eventually just the whole thing exploded and broke. So keep in mind the materials that you're going to utilize in a mold and make sure that you prep for that material. So if it does utilize foam, there will be expansion and there will be pressure build up in that mold. I believe that video is on Instagram somewhere in the archives, if you want to go search for it. Good luck. So let's go to the next section of our presentation. Put some of this stuff away. We're going to talk about the expansion ratio and weight. As you realize and notice, most of the products that we make have some kind of designation behind it. So Flex Foam at 7FR. The 7, what does that 7 stand for? Let's see right here. What's that 7 stand for? The 7 stands for the weight of the material in a cubic foot. So if you had a cubic foot, whatever that shape is, cubic foot of this material, it would weigh 7 pounds in a cubic foot. Once it expands, you cut the cubic foot down, it weighs 7 pounds. So that's how you designate the foam products that we have. So we have Flex Foam at 7, Flex Foam at 26. What are some of the other ones? We use the foam at 4. So this product, once it expands, it's 4 pounds in a cubic foot. So you can already tell that this material is going to be much lighter than the Flex Foam at 7FR. So the number behind the Foamit series stands for the weight of the material in a cubic foot. That's how we designate the products. Furthermore, the smaller the number of the material, the more expansion it's going to have. So let's go back to the Foamit 3. Actually, we have even better, Flex Foamit 3. Flex Foamit 3 is a 2-to-1 mix ratio product. This material has an expansion rate of 18 times. What does that mean? That means if you pour all this material in one shot, you're going to get 18 times this much material once it expands and solidifies. So the lower the number of the material you're using, the Flex Foamit 3 is going to have the biggest expansion ratio of the Flex Foam products that we make. Whereby the Flex Foamit 25, let's see if we have that here. The Flex Foamit 25, what's the weight on this material? Anybody? Can somebody answer that? Yeah, we got somebody in the back there. It's 25 pounds. Correct. So that would be 25 pounds in a cubic foot once it fully expands. Now, to give you guys a quick demonstration of what that looks like in the real world, we're going to mix up some material. Don't need that. Now, like I said, this is a 2-to-1 mix ratio product. Very noticeable whenever you receive material that has 2 parts of B, 1 part of A. It's a very easy tell sign that this material is a 2-to-1 mix ratio, in this case by volume. So very easy to handle even though it's 2-to-1. Remember, we try to make these as easy as possible for the end user. We don't try to make them really weird mix ratios. Every once in a while, there is a specific material that does call for a gram scale to be used when mixing, when dispensing. But in this case, we do try to make them as easy to use as possible. So again, I'm going to do a quick demonstration here with the Flex Foamit 3 and the 26? No, it's the 25, thank you. You're using the product and you still don't know what you're using. Now, if you're not familiar, it's the first time you're using these products, do make sure that you check the technical bulletin so that you understand how to handle these materials, what the mix ratio is. The last thing you want to do is do a silly mistake as dispense the wrong mix ratio. So you have a 2-to-1 material, 2-to-1 mix ratio, you end up dispensing a 1-to-1. It does happen. We're human beings. We tend to make mistakes. It's just important to realize that all this information is readily available for you at your fingertips. You just need to know where to look for it. Now, one thing I do know about the Flex Foamate series, this is a very fast reacting material. We have anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds of work time with this product. Unfortunately, there is no way to really slow down the cure of these materials, the activation of them. You just have to understand the working time and how to utilize that for your benefit, so that whatever you're pouring, whatever you're doing, ends up in success and not just material that's expanding in your mixing container. Now already I can tell this material is much thicker, much heavier. It feels much heavier than the other product. Therefore, the cell structure, it's going to be much denser. It's going to have a much lower expansion ratio. But it's still going to be on the flexible side. In case you haven't seen it, I did do a video where I filled the tires of my lawn tractor cart with expanding polyurethane foam. In that case, it was the Flex Foamate 25. It's a very rigid, flexible foam, so to say, very durable, very tough, that is ideal for applications that need a lot of strength. And you can see that material expanding. Again, very quick working time. You don't want to delay when pouring these materials because they will start to react in the mixing container. Oh, that actually gave us quite a lot more expansion than I anticipated. And I hope we make a little mess here. So now I'm mixing the Flex Foamate 3. Scrape the sides, scrape the bottom of your mixing container. Can you zoom out and show us the rising of the 26? There it goes. Well, that's nothing compared to the 3. Once the 3 starts expanding, you really get it. Wow, I never seen the... That's the 3? Shoot. That makes a lot of sense, right? Why is the 3 expanding so much? Thanks for paying attention. So, Flex Foamate 3 versus Flex Foamate 26. I guess we don't need a big container like this. We can put in a little guy. I was like, wow, that's quite a bit of expansion for a 26. That brings me to a very interesting story. When I was dispensing 2 different materials, and I had them side by side, I ended up actually switching the part A's and part B's, and eventually I ended up getting a mutant product out of the castings that I was making because I was not paying attention to exactly what I was mixing. So even though you're a long-time user of these materials, keep in mind, keep a clear path of what you're doing, what materials are using, and make sure that you don't mix the wrong products together. So Flex Foamate 3, really quick, short working time, expands into 18 times its original volume, while the Flex Foamate 26 only expands twice its original volume. So not much expansion out of the 26, but the density you're going to get out of this material is uncompared to the density of the Flex Foamate 3. And just to give you an example, this is the Foamate 26. So this is the rigid cousin of the Flex Foamate 25. This is a 26, and I'm going to take my glove off real quick here. See, do we have any kind of rigid tools? Yes, we do. So this is the rigid foam. A pair of scissors. can see how tough that foam is. It's really hard to put any kind of indent. You definitely cannot indent it with your fingernails. This piece is as tough as plastic. So you can see how rigid foams can get when utilizing the right product. So whether you are needing something that's really dense and hard, like the Flex Foam at 25 or the Foam at 26, or whether you're looking for something that has a lot more expansion ratio and is lightweight, like the Flex Foam at 3 here. Oh, this is quite set up. Very nice. So here you can see the difference in the expansion ratio of some of these products. Across the board, you're going to have many different products that have different expansion ratios, and they're going to show you a different finish once they expand it into the mold as well, because they all have different sizes of the cell structure. So just a couple of different examples here of what the expanding foams are capable of and what they look like when they actually fully react. All right. So that brings us to the next, and we're going to put these aside. We can see if we can get them out a little later. Put these aside. Brings us to the next presentation that we have, which is the painting and casting effects of foams. So we already talked briefly about the priming of the mold. So you can take a primer to a silicone mold because the silicone will release the primer, no problem. Spray painted, you prime the mold so that when you're casting into it, you already have a primed surface that is much easier to paint with all kinds of different finishes. Keep in mind that some aerosol paints do have chemicals in them, solvents that will melt foams. By applying a primer to your mold first, you're now opening a much wider door as far as what kind of painting you can do on your casting. Now, speaking of rigid castings of foam and painting, here we have a nice example of actually the easy spray foam that came out of our cartridge. So this was sprayed into a mold. You can see the finish of this foam. I can tell already that this is a spray application because we don't have a uniform backing. It's not filled, this main area, but rather depressed into the mold, so that means this was sprayed. There is no rigid material on the outside here. It is just the foam itself. But because the mold was primed beforehand, we're able to paint this casting with ease. And this particular casting was actually painted using Maker Pro paints. This is our own in-house line of paints that are very good and very durable, that won't easily scratch off and lose its colorant if they're exposed to UV. Now, we do have a very exciting YouTube live presentation on the Maker Pro paint, so if you're looking to fall asleep, if you're looking for an exciting presentation, my coworker Kevin did a great job on that, showing us how Maker Pro paints are used. So check out the YouTube live presentation on the Maker Pro paints. Now, if you are interested in painting flexible casting using the Maker Pro paints, that is also possible. We do have an additive for the material called Flexor that you can add to the Maker Pro paints, making them flexible and durable on flexible foam casting. So this is a flexible foam. As you can see, I can easily, or I can squeeze it, shape it, and form it. But the paint itself on it is very durable and won't scratch off even when you put your fingernails to it. Or if you try to just squeeze the casting and see if the paint will chip off, it will not. This is actually quite durable product and will stay on the casting once you make it. So flexible additive for the Makeup Pro paints to finish your foam castings in a nice finish with colorants. Furthermore, we did use the Makeup Pro paints on painting of this archery target piece, the peacock. That is also all use of the Makeup Pro paints. Again, this is a flexible prop, so a flexible target, rather said. And the paint itself is not only vibrant and nice looking, but it's very durable and it will not scratch off when you put a tool or your hands to it. So it's very durable and great to use. Now, you can color your foams for casting purpose, so you can add colorant to it. The only thing that you want to be aware of, you want to make sure that the colorant you're using is for polyurethane castings, not for silicone, not even epoxy. I don't think epoxy colorants are that good for it. But you can add colorant to it to get different colors in the casting itself. This is a green color that I added to the motorcycle seat. If you are going to use stuff like Cast Magic, in this case here, we do recommend having a rigid or semi-rigid skin on the outside, but then backing up your casting with foam. So this is the Foam It 3, and the outer shell is made out of urethane plastic that has the Cast Magic embedded in it. If you just use the Cast Magic in the foam itself, it's not going to come out looking this nice and shiny. It's just a powder color and filler, so it's not going to have the same effects. If you do have a flexible mold, you could brush it in and try that out. As always, when you're doing something that's out of the norm, out of the usual, then we suggest doing a small scale test so that you can test your application before you go to make larger pieces. In case there is an issue, you want to discover it on a small scale, not on a large scale. So, speaking of painting and priming and casting, going back to our casting we did earlier into the primed mold, here we have that casting. I did this prior to the presentation, so we have something that's already cured and ready to go. So I'm simply going to put it on the edge of our table, give it a little flex, and then demold the casting. All right, that's actually pretty good. So let me show you guys. So here's our mold and our casting coming out of the mold. You can see that the mold is completely, the center of the mold is completely cleared off of the primer that we sprayed into it. Instead, the primer is on our foam casting already. It has a nice surface finish that it added to the casting, while the back is made out of foam. Very lightweight, very durable, and in this case, ready for the painting process, either with acrylic paints or using one of our Makeup Pro paints. So, either large scale or small scale, the the pre-priming of your mold when using silicone molds is a great way to minimize the steps that you have to do in your final. So put that aside, showed you how that looks when it comes out of the mold. Now let's talk about some foam coatings. As you might be aware, nowadays a lot of sculptors, a lot of DIY artists, we make a lot of stuff out of foam. We basically cut the foam, shape it, and then coat it with many different products in order to get either a flexible or a rigid coating on the outside. And Smooth On makes a number of different products that are not foams, but are for the foam coating industry and are designated as foam coatings. Some of those products that I want to quickly mention. Number one that I utilize is the Urethane. Let's go back to our Thor hammer, if we can find it. So this casting right here is actually made with Flex Foam at 5 with a outer shell or coating of Urethane. Now, that looks pretty nice and clean. The lines are clean, the finish looks nice. This is way too nice to look like something that was painted on with a coating, with a urethane coating. And it wasn't. I did not paint this on after the foam was casted. I painted this into the mold instead. And what do I mean by that? Basically, we open up the mold, brush in the Urethane. Actually, what we did, we brushed in the Cast Magic. This is the Silver Bullet, I believe. So we brushed in the Silver Bullet into the silicone mold, then brushed it with the Urethane that was pigmented black, as you can see in the handle actually. The handle is black. There you go. A little bit more of the Cast Magic in the bottom of the handle. But this is basically Urethane just by itself. Once we brushed in the material inside the mold, we turned the mold inside out, so we turned it back to where it should be, put it back in the mold box, and then poured foam into it, creating a nice crisp finish on our casting with a urethane rubber coating, but a flexible, durable foam on the inside. So now you have a prop, in this case, that has a durable outside coating that makes it almost indestructible, very durable, yet soft enough that you can use it on your actors and won't hurt anybody. So this is Urethane utilized in a mold as a brush-on for protection of the foam that comes out. Another example of the Urethane being used, put this aside, Urethane being used as a brush-on material. Whoa, look at that big rock. Well, it's pretty heavy, but I can do it. I'm so strong. So this is Urethane brushed onto, what do you call it? Sorry? Upholstery foam like this? That's exactly what it is. So there's sheets of upholstery foam that's stacked here and basically glued together, and then finally coated with the Urethane, finalized with some sprinkles like you would do on ice cream. Just kidding. This is the quarry tone that we finished it with so that it actually does resemble realistic stone finish. So Urethane utilized as a final coating versus Urethane utilized as a coating in a mold. So you can see how much more detail finish we can get by brushing it into a mold versus brushing it onto a finished surface. But the key is here to have a durable rubber coating on a flexible prop or finished piece that is going to protect the casting itself and also protect the users, the end user of the piece. Furthermore, we have rigid materials that are used for the coating of foams. More specific, I'm talking about the Epsilon and the Epsilon Pro. So Epsilon was developed as a coating for EPS foam. As you may be aware, EPS foam is easily meltable by epoxies and other chemicals, including spray paints. Therefore, you can't just coat the EPS foam with any epoxy. You have to utilize specific epoxies that are not going to melt the foam. This is what EPS foam actually is. This is the packing foam that you usually see around your electronics, but is also commonly used in all kinds of building, DIY building of props and theater pieces. And every once in a while you need to coat it with a material. We would recommend using either the Epsilon or the Epsilon Pro. What's the difference between Epsilon, Epsilon Pro? The Epsilon Pro is a semi-rigid material, so it's not fully rigid. It does have some give, so in case you bump it, it's not easily going to crack or damage itself, but it rather gives, bends before it breaks. Furthermore, we have products such as the Habitat Cast and Coat, which is utilized as a brush-on application over foam pieces that will give us another rigid shell. So another product that can be utilized for coating of materials. In this case, it's called Cast and Coat. So you can also cast it solid, but you can also use it as a coating. Works great as a rigid coating over foams. Furthermore, we're going back to the Styrocoat and the Easy Spray Junior. Remember we talked about this? Ta-da! So you can utilize this system as well with the Easy Spray Styrocoat. Styrocoat is a material specifically developed for spraying of foams and foam props. Think about theme parks that create large mushrooms, trees, all kinds of different things that they create out of foam. They need a rigid coating to coat the entire piece. And instead of standing there brushing it on with a tiny little brush or even a large brush, they will utilize something like this and a material like the Styrocoat that you can spray over the entire foam surface, come back, sand it if you have to once it cures, and then even apply a second coat, paint it, finish it however you want. So Styrocoat Easy Spray is utilized on large-scale application. Usually you would see something like that at theme parks. Think about Universal, Disney, where they have large walk-through areas and they need to make large props. They would coat them with something like the Easy Spray Styrocoat. Furthermore, I do have an example with Freeform Air, which is a putty that I generally utilize when coating foams with a rigid product that's easy to carve. But before I show you that, Alex, can you show us the video from Tested, I believe? So Tested did a video with Frank Ippolito, who's a customer of ours, and they created this huge dragon for a gaming convention. I believe this is Dragon Hunter. I'm not 100% sure. But the prop, as you can see, was carved out of foam, which is on a metal armature. And then they applied the Freeform Habitat Black over the foam. And something really important that I just saw Frank do there, he sprays a little bit of water or isopropyl alcohol on the foam before he starts applying the epoxy. Right there again, I'm pretty sure that's the isopropyl alcohol that he is applying there. So very easy sculpting, hard, rigid medium that you can apply over foam surfaces, foam structures, that is very durable, and once cured, you can paint, you can carve, and finish the piece any way you want. Here you can see him adding actually texture to the casting before we saw that little advertisement. So for that, I do want to do a quick presentation of how I go about mixing and applying Freeform Air to different foam surfaces. So here we have Freeform Air, epoxy putty. This is a 1-to-1 mix ratio by volume. No gram scale is necessary. We got an A and a B, equal amounts. I can simply start by squeezing it together, kneading it over itself until we get a uniform color of gray. So you shouldn't see any streaking off the material. It should be all a uniform color. Now, I received a technical ticket actually a couple months ago of a customer who loves the Freeform Air. She loves using it, but she's having such a tough time she cannot make it stick to any of her foam builds. So she will carve foam, make these elaborate builds out of foam, and when she wants to go to put the Freeform Air on it, it just doesn't want to stick. I get it, just kneading it onto itself. until we get a nice uniform color. And keep in mind that the freeform air is available in several different versions. We have the freeform air fast, freeform air fire retardant, the regular freeform air, or freeform air HT, and the freeform of a freeform. Oh, I just sound like a freeform. So we have our material mixed, and if you go to stick it to the foam, man, I want to just put this onto the foam. Man, it's not sticking. It comes more off on my gloves than it sticks to the foam material. So in cases like that, when I use a little bit of water. So a little bit of water on the surface that you're trying to bond, and then you take your material and you basically squeeze it onto it. You press it as much as you can with your fingers down onto the foam. A little bit over the top, smooth it out. You can see how I feathered that. And with a little bit of water, you can almost make it like a slip. You see how easy and nice that sticks now? Same thing with the EPS foam. If you just go to stick the material onto it, it has a very tough time. But if you come back with a little bit of water, now the material sticks no problem. Keep in mind that I utilize water here for the freeform air just because I use the material so much. I know what works best for it. You can also utilize isopropyl alcohol. I found that the isopropyl alcohol works very well on the on the freeform air fast and the freeform air HT, whereby the regular freeform air works great with just regular water. Now, you can take this now and sculpt into it. You can wait for it to solidify and sand it. You can add texture to it. A very versatile material of what you can do with it. One of my favorite products that Smooth-On manufactures, freeform air. Now, what are some of the examples that you can do with freeform air on foam surfaces? I did want to show you a little diorama that I made a while ago that everybody seems to have a liking to, that I made over EPS foam. All right. We have here a little ship diorama. My favorite spacecraft here from Star Wars crashed on some foreign planet. But the most important part that I want to show, so this is all here on top made out of freeform air. This is freeform air that was stamped and applied. This is freeform air that was stamped into a mold. And then, most importantly, what I wanted to show you, keep that zoomed in, that's fine. Right there. So this is our work surface right here. This is, right here. This is EPS foam. You can see that. See how I'm chipping that away? Oh my God, don't do that. It's such a nice piece. I made it. I can do whatever I want. But I wanted to show you that this is EPS foam, very soft material, very easy to maneuver and change the shape of. I cut some crevasses here, like caves. Here's another one. You can see the cave that I cut into here, stalagmites. But here you can see clearly how I build that out of sheets of EPS foam. And the freeform air was easy to make stick to the foam, and I was able to carve it, stamp it, sculpt it to a nice surface finish that I liked. So a nice little Star Wars diorama there made with freeform air an epoxy over a foam surface structure. There you go, nice example. All right, that brings us to the last section of our presentation that I want to talk about, and that is the common issues with polyurethane liquid foam products. Some of the biggest issue that I see customers struggling with is the lack of premixing of the products. So when you get the material and you start to work with it, instead of giving it a thorough premix and shake, people just dispense the material. I know because I've done it before. The result of that is that the material just doesn't rise as you would expect it, and also potentially collapses. So it can rise and suddenly collapse on itself. I've seen that before in my own castings, so I know that it can happen when the material is not thoroughly premixed. The simplest thing that you can do is follow the instructions that are laid out in the technical bulletin, premix the A and B separately, go the extra step, mix the B part separately if it calls for it, and then combine the two materials. Of course, scrape the sides, scrape the bottom off that mixing container when you're working with it. And unlike any other mixing of our products, you do want to whip in as much air as possible into a material. So if you're mixing with a paddle mixer, make sure you whip that material really hard, like you would do if you're mixing whipped cream for your cake or your coffee. If you are using a mechanical mixer, a paddle mixer like this is really beneficial because it does whip air into the mixing process. So a paddle mixer like the Green Meanie, you can see that it's going to mix a lot of air into the mixture itself, and that's actually what we want from a foam product. Now, speaking of premixing, leads us right into the next issue. Collapsed castings can be either due to the lack of premixing of the A and B, or the wrong release agent was used. So if you end up utilizing the wrong release agent for your castings, you could end up with a collapsed casting. The material expands. Once it gets in contact with the release agent, it just collapses on itself. Another reason why the material could collapse is the temperature. What are you talking about, temperature? It's nice and warm in the room. Yes, it's warm in here. The material should react just fine, but keep in mind, you ordered that material last Thursday. It shipped out on Friday. It's set in Nebraska on a trailer in the cold over the weekend. Now you get the material and it's been sitting on a delivery truck for another couple of hours. You get the material and it's actually really cold. The material as you get it in the containers, these two containers are now super cold. And if you go to dispense this material out of these containers, the material is not going to be up to temperature. What do I mean by up to temperature? Foams and RTV products, room temperature vulcanization products, like room temperature. What's room temperature? Room temperature is 73 Fahrenheit. That's the temperature that these materials should be stored at, and the temperature that these materials should be used at. So if you receive material that's been sitting out in the cold or sitting in a cold storage area, make sure you bring it up to temperature. That can take several days sometimes. If you have a large quantity of material, let's say you have a 55-gallon drum of material, that's not going to warm up in, let's say, a day. That's going to take 2-3 days for it to actually bring up to temperature where you can then finally use the material. So keep that in mind. Not only does the material collapse from not proper handling, but it can also collapse from the temperature, the ambient temperature of the workshop, of the material that you're using. Furthermore, another issue that I find with using these materials is the fact that they have a short working time. Flex foamed products, more so than rigid foams, they have an extremely short working time, 30 to 90 seconds. 30 to 90 seconds, you have to mix the product and get it inside your mold before it starts expanding. If your pour spout on the mold is not large enough, that product is going to go everywhere. So keep those things in mind as you process the material. Make sure that you understand the material, and instead of it being a burden and an issue, make sure you understand how to process it and make it work for you. Finally, something I wanted to touch up that is overlooked in the foams is the fact that the material, when cast in large quantities, does weird things. It can lead to material shredding. So here we have a casting where the material has foamed up, it started rising, and because there was so much material, the weight of it in this section here made it just shred. It fell off. It ripped and fell off. Furthermore, here we have some rips in the foam itself. And that's an indicator that the material reacted so rapidly, so quickly, that it was under so much pressure and so much force that it ripped and shared itself. That same thing can happen inside your mold. So here we have a casting, a cross-cut section of the casting. Let's hold it upside down, because that's how we casted this piece. And what ends up happening is when we pour material into a void, it starts to rise, right? Once the material hits a hindrance, issue, such as in this case the chin area, so the material rose from the bottom, hit the chin area, and couldn't go any further up. So it started going around the bend, around the corner, and right there, now this is a small tear, and it's inside a rigid casting, so it doesn't make much difference, but that's a tear inside the mold, inside the material as it's curing. So you can see how that on a large scale, let's say you're casting, a gallon, 2 gallons of this material, a small tear like that on a larger scale can suddenly blow up and cause all kinds of issues and deem the casting a failure, to a point where it actually can explode and rip your molds apart. Again, I would urge you to go to Instagram and search for that exploding mold. Unfortunately, we can't show it here. So those are some of the issues that you would deal with expanding foams. I'm sure there are some things that I am forgetting. After all, I am a human being. I'm not a lizard person. So if there is something that I missed, please feel free, put it in the notes, let us know. We love to interact with you. We love to hear your thoughts. But before we close up, let's go quickly over the things that we have learned today. So we went over the polyurethane expanding foams. More specifically, we talked about what polyurethane expanding foams are, when and why you would use polyurethane expanding foams, what the difference is between closed cell and open cell foams. We talked about release agents for pourable foams, as well as covering the rigid versus flexible versus silicone foam that Smooth-On manufactures. We talked about the type of molds that we need to create for casting of foams and what to look out for. We talked about the expansion ratio, the weight of the foams, as well as the painting and cast effects, and foam coatings, finalizing it with common issues with polyurethane foams. Now, what are the products that we utilize today? We talked and utilized the Foam-It 3. This is the rigid foam. We utilized the Flex Foam-It 3. Foam-It 4 Black, which is, again, the only one product in the foam lineup that we have that's pigmented. We utilized the Flex Foam-It 7 FR, which we casted the motorcycle seat in that we're going to open right now. We used the Flex Foam-It, the Flex Foam-It 25, East Release 2831, Universal Release Agent, as well as the Sonite Wax. Now, before I say goodbye to you guys, I do want to go ahead and quickly take a look at this beautiful mold here. We casted this about an hour and a half, almost 2 hours ago, so it should be good enough to demold. And I just wanted you guys to see kind of what it takes. It's not as straightforward and easy as you might think it is. So here we have some material that seeped out, stuck to some of the parts of the mold. And, you know, we have a handle here that should be pretty easy to open. There's so much suction on these parts from the liquid expanding in there. It is not going to be easy to open up using just my hands. Alex, can you do me a favor? Grab me a pry bar, a screwdriver, or something sharp that I won't injure myself with. So some of this I can go ahead and rip off immediately. Some of it I'm going to keep for the opening of the mold. You can just clean up the area a little bit here. Oh, you can just toss it at me. I'll catch it with my face. Just kidding. All right. It's a Phillips screwdriver. All right, so get a little bit underneath there and slowly pry it open. Now remember, if it doesn't open slowly, easily, just pry it in a couple of different spots. We don't want to put too much strain on any part of this mold. And now we're ready to open it up. Voila. So here's our casting coming out of that rigid mold. Not bad. So a little bit of the leftover, this gets trimmed off with scissors or razor blade afterwards. But the casting overall came out good. I'm very satisfied with the casting. This is actually a useful casting. We can actually put this in production and finalize a seat from it. So there you have a simple, easy way to cast expanding flexible polyurethane foam. Now, I do want to thank you guys all for watching and participating today and joining us in our live presentations. And don't forget, we will be announcing further events on our social media networks, in our emails, newsletters, and on our YouTube channel. So don't forget to subscribe, sign up, and follow us. And if you have an idea about what we should do next or next topic that we should cover in one of our YouTube lives, please let us know down in the comments below. We do read those comments, and we do want to help you guys out with your projects. Now, keep in mind, we do offer seminars here at Smooth On, so you can come in and take a class, mold making, casting. Unfortunately, our September seminar is sold out for the basics mold making. There is a concrete mold making and casting seminar, as well as our MedSim Masterclass coming up on September 7th. So check that out. November? Did I say September? I meant November. Thanks for that. Furthermore, our distributors, Reynolds Advanced Materials, they do also have in-house classes. So if you live near Reynolds Advanced Materials, do check them out. Do check out their website. They do give classes in their shops as well as college initiatives that they come out and visit you guys and show off what these materials can do for you. So with that, I want to say again, thank you for participation, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.